Well, good morning. Have you ever asked yourself this question, why in the world am I here? You ever wondered that? I'm convinced that we often ask the question, and what's interesting is how we try to answer the question. Have you ever gone to a bookstore? Those still exist, by the way. But you've gone to a bookstore, and you look in the self-help section, and the self-help section is loaded with books. Anybody ever done that before? All right, 4 of you. This will go over well, and thank you. Know your audience, Jason. Ask a different question. But when we look in self-help, it's interesting because a lot of the books are like how you can help you. Even more so, I think about at work, we try to figure out how do we get the next promotion or the title, or if that group of people would just accept me. So there's this effort of approval. Sometimes it's an accumulation of things. Sometimes it's more money. It's these things. And what's interesting is the target always moves. And so when I think about purpose, I ask myself this question. What if true purpose, and again, it's a cliche word, but what if true purpose begins not in finding the right answer, but in finding or being with the right person, Jesus. Because in pursuit of an answer to the question, when we don't find an answer, we tend to veer off track and we find the wrong answer or no answer and we spiral. But what if the question we're asking isn't the right question? What if the question many of you have been asking, I've been asking for 10, 20, 30 years, 3 years, what if it's not the right question? You say, well, how do I know I'm not asking the right question? Because we wouldn't need to find an answer that would take 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, and 40 years to answer. The answer is there. I just wonder if we're asking the right question. So here's a question for you. When do you personally most often ask, why am I here? Let me give you a few situations that maybe you have found yourself in, or you know someone close to you and they have found themselves in this situation. A person sitting in a hospital room next to a loved one who just received a difficult diagnosis. The noise in the room are the machines that hum quietly. The nurse steps out. The two of you are left there all alone, and your loved one looks at you and says, why am I even here? Or, potentially, when life feels out of control in that situation, or maybe you find yourself in this one, you move to a new city for a job. You show up on day one of the job, and guess what? You walk into a crowded office, and it seems like everybody knows everybody except you know nobody. Nobody speaks to you. In fact, one step further, you eat lunch alone. You finish up your very first day of work and you go home to your tiny house or your tiny apartment and you sit there by yourself with maybe a warmed up meal alone and you ask yourself, why am I here? Or a person walks into church maybe this morning and you're not even sure why you're here. Maybe somebody invited you, or maybe yesterday you felt guilty about something and you thought, I better go today. And so you're here and you look around and you're like, these people seem to know each other, but you are sitting in a seat. And the room might feel full, but you still feel alone. And you ask yourself, why am I here? Or last, a person sitting in church, and you made a decision last year, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, and maybe only you know, or maybe a small group of people around you know the decision that you made. And you believe in forgiveness, but for you it's a theory. Because you tell yourself that there's no way whatever it was could be forgiven. And so what happens is shame lingers in the shadows. Always seems to come out at just the right moment to remind you, hey, remember that? Maybe it's something you wish you could undo, and you sit around and you think, why am I even here? And what's interesting about this question is it's not just a personal question, it's actually a universal question. And what do I mean by that? It extends beyond Monroe. It extends beyond the state of Georgia. It's actually very human. In fact, listen to this. Up to 91% of people experience, quote, purpose anxiety. 91%. So 9% don't, 91% do. 58% of young adults said their life lacked meaning and purpose last month. Most Americans, 57%, ask, how can I find more meaning at least every 30 days? Did you know that people with a strong sense of purpose live longer and healthier? So it's not just a spiritual need, it's a deeply human need. Let me read this to you. We've been trained to think of purpose as a hidden answer. In fact, it's like you're playing hide and seek with purpose and you hope you find it. Sometimes we even feel like we're playing that same game with God. So God's hiding it from us, and if I'm lucky enough to find it, I'm good. What if purpose isn't elusive? But we don't seem to find it because we're not actually asking the right question. What if asking the right question could change everything? What if that question is the wrong pursuit and the better question is this? Where is Jesus and how can I join him? So where is he and how do I join him where he is? When I think about this question, it's not just a personal question. It's not just this human question. It's actually a biblical question. In fact, there's a story in the Bible, in the New Testament specifically, and it highlights this woman who had a normal life. Then all of a sudden, at some point in her life, everything changed. Went from normal to isolation and struggle, back to joy. In fact, those examples I mentioned to you earlier, she experienced every single one of them, at least the emotional part of every single one of them. It's interesting when you read her story. It's in the New Testament and what we call the Gospel. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's not in John, but it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the details are slightly different. Doesn't mean they contradict each other, but they just add different details. One's a longer version, one's a shorter version. Some use certain words more so than others. But I love the way Luke writes the story. Interestingly enough, Luke is a physician, so he has a unique perspective on a medical issue that this woman has been facing for 12 years. In fact, here's the story. Jesus is just coming from across the lake. He just healed a demon-possessed man. And on his way, there's a gentleman. His name is Jairus. He's a respected community leader. He, with urgency, comes to Jesus and he says, hey, I have a daughter. She's 12 years old and she needs to be healed. I mean, she desperately needs to be healed. And Jesus is walking with Jairus to his house to heal his 12-year-old daughter. And on the way, he is surrounded by a crowd of people, and something happens, and he encounters a woman. This is interesting to me. I have no explanation, but it's interesting to me. He encounters a woman. On his way to heal a 12-year-old girl, he encounters a woman who has been struggling with the disease for 12 years. So he's on his way to heal a young girl, and when she was born is when this woman's struggle began. I don't know the reason, I just find it interesting. But here's what the story says in Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 43. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She could find no cure. In fact, if you read another account, you will read that she had spent every single dime she had. She had visited every single physician, and nobody could do anything for her. Coming up behind Jesus, he didn't see her. She touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately the bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. Everybody denied it. I mean, he's in a crowd, and Peter said, Master, the whole crowd is pressing up against you. What do you mean? And Jesus said, someone deliberately. Their mission was to touch him because they needed something. For I felt the healing power go from me. And the woman realized that she could not stay hidden any longer. She began to tremble, fell to her knees in front of him. She was behind him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she touched him, and that she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, daughter, with great affection, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. There's a part of the story in the Gospel of Matthew that I love, that Jesus turns to her and he looks at her. He sees her. And what's interesting about the story is none of us want to feel noticed, but every single one of us want to be seen. But that's where fear begins, because we're afraid to be seen exactly like we are. I remember years ago, my parents are here, and I remember, as humorous as this is, I don't even remember who this lady was, but she would like come over and clean up. And I remember that we would have to clean up before she came to clean up, you know? And so, I mean, I guess I was like, it's part of what you do, you know? And it's not like it was on the regular, but I just remember, like, we cleaned up before she came to clean up. And what's interesting is, we want people to see what we want people to see, because if they see what is really there, they may not really like us. And this lady came from behind Jesus just to deliberately touch his robe. She didn't need to have a conversation with him. She didn't need to hug him. She just needed to touch the edge of his robe. And Jesus knew something was different. Here she is. We don't know how old this lady is. If you study, she was maybe in her late 20s, could actually be in her 40s, right? But for 12 years, she had struggled with a blood issue. Depending on the story that you read, some talk about blood, a discharge, and you're like, that sounds gross. But here's what's interesting. When you understand the full story, think about it this way. Because of her being labeled unclean, she was forced into isolation. She wasn't received by the Jewish culture. She was considered unclean. In fact, if you touched her, you are now unclean and you must be in isolation too. So you think she started out in her life being relatively normal. Maybe she had clarity on purpose on like, I get to move around the people. I get to be with the people. I actually get to do this and that. Until 12 years ago, everything changed for this lady. Remember the 4 stories we read at the beginning? Maybe things are going along and then all of a sudden something big changes for you. That was her story. She's just going through her life, doing her normal thing. Maybe she had clarity on what she was supposed to do, who she was becoming, and then 12 years, everything changed. She had an issue that she couldn't hide, except she was hidden because she was forced into isolation. She wasn't received. She couldn't go into the temple anymore. And in that time, going into the temple was being with God. That's how the Jewish culture taught. Of course, Jesus changed that, but she wasn't allowed. So you can imagine normal living, 12 years, she has an issue, and now she's forced into isolation. Could you imagine the disruption that created in her life? That I have clarity on at least my role and what I'm supposed to be doing, but now that I have this and I'm forced into isolation, I'm not allowed into the temple, I can't touch anybody because then they're unclean. But what does she do with her life? It's a massive disruption. And what's interesting is she had every right to ask me-related questions. Why me? What about me? Why did this happen to me? But she turned all of those questions into one question. And the question is this: where is he? Not what about me, but where is he? Because she knew that in her pursuit of trying to figure it out, she had already been down that road. No doctor could help her. Every dime she had, she spent. She was in isolation. She wasn't allowed to hang out with people. She couldn't go to the temple. She had nothing to lose. And so she secretly, out of isolation, out of the shadows, decided to make her way with the question, where is he? Because if I can get to him, if I can join him wherever he is, my life will change. She wasn't necessarily on a purpose mission, but she was on a Jesus mission. She asked a different question, and she got a different answer. I jotted this down. She didn't get a plan, but she got a person. She didn't get a plan, but she got peace. And for some of you this morning, your life is chaotic, and you just, God, if I could just have a little bit of peace. What if it all comes by asking a better question? Jesus, where are you? And how can I join you where you are? On that day, her life changed. Her purpose clarified. Not because she was in pursuit of clarification, she was in pursuit of a person. What if we could find simplicity over complexity? Well, imagine if following Jesus was actually the clarifying part. I don't have to rummage through the self-help books. I mean, they're fine. I don't have to do a pros and a cons list. That's fine. I don't have to get 13 opinions. I mean, that's fine, depending on who you're asking. But what if the question is, Jesus, where are you, and how do I join you there? When I was about 16 years old, I had recently started following Jesus, and back in the day, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, we called it a course back in the day, but it was 16 weeks, and it was called Experiencing God. Anybody ever heard of that or gone through that? Okay, all right, cool. I had no idea. I mean, 16 weeks as a 16-year-old, massive commitment, right? I was just interested, will I have gas money to get from here to there? You know what I'm saying? And so I just kept showing up. I didn't know why, but I kept showing up because I was trying to figure out, where is Jesus working, and how do I join him there? Because if I could figure that part out, it changes everything. And here's what I learned. It's not up to me to figure out. It's up to him to show me. The burden is not on me. The responsibility is on him. You know what is mine to do? We're actually going to answer that question in just a second. So we spend time, we read, we ask questions, we listen to podcasts, we do all these types of things in hope that, if we can just find that thing, it will unlock whatever it is we're trying to find. Some of you have been trying this for decades, and you still haven't found it. It shouldn't be that way. There has to be a better way. Never once did Jesus say, you need to figure it out. Never once. Never once did he say to his disciples, hey, you need to figure it out. But Jesus did say, follow me. In fact, if you were to study Jewish culture and how they followed the rabbis, right? Not just Jesus being a rabbi, a teacher, but rabbi in the Jewish culture, there's this idea that you should have the dust of the rabbi as they walk the dusty roads on you, which means that you are in close proximity to the rabbi. The only thing that matters is watching the master, watching the rabbi, and you're so close to the rabbi that you literally have the dust from where he is walking on you as you follow him. And Jesus is saying, you don't have the capacity to figure it out. In fact, Adam and Eve thought they could figure it out, and that got us not into a good spot. But since then until now, humans are trying to figure it out. It is not on you, and it is not on me to figure it out, because we can't. And he never said, figure it out. But he did say, hey, follow me. But that's hard. In fact, sometimes we think, is God hiding something from me? What if God is not hiding something from you? He's just waiting for you to be with him. What if it's his invitation, hey, walk with me, Jason? Experience me, Jason. Not good luck, Jason, trying to figure it out. In fact, there's a wonderful verse in the New Testament. Paul writes this in Ephesians. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. Somebody in here this morning, you're asking yourself, why in the world are you here? What in the world does God want for you? And I think sometimes we overcomplicate purpose. And the simplification is this. Jesus says, be with me, walk with me. You know what else he told the disciples? You got to love other people. You know what we're awesome at doing? Loving other people like us. You know what we are not good at doing? Loving other people that look different than us, believe different than us, act different than us. The closer you are to the rabbi, the easier it is to love other people the rabbi loves. That's what he asks us to do. Follow me. Be with me. Love other people. You know what? We are educated beyond our ability to obey him. We think if we could just know that one more thing, I'll have clarity. And I think sometimes Jesus is like, hey, you can't even get the basics down. Love me and love people. When you get that, we'll talk about the other stuff. So it's simple. You say, well, Jason, you don't know my life. It's a lot harder than that. I don't know your life. But I think sometimes we overcomplicate purpose. The most important thing about you isn't what you do. The most important thing about you is who you follow. Following the job, following the money, following fear, following confusion, trying to read, man, that next book, oh, this podcast is going to be it. Scrolling, like if I could just find that one thing, it will change everything. And Jesus says, you cannot figure it out, but you can follow me. A long time ago, you ever heard of the book Purpose Driven Life? There was a guy, a pastor, his name is Rick Warren. And he wrote Purpose Driven Life. You know what's interesting? You know who encouraged and told him to write that book? Billy Graham. Billy Graham was a man that had clarity of purpose because he followed Jesus closely. And he told Rick Warren, you need to write that book. You have one man that was very clear on his purpose. Follow Jesus. Do what the master says. Do what the rabbi says. Telling another, it's all about Jesus. Write the book who helped another man find his purpose. And then 35 million copies later into 85 different languages. And it became the best-selling nonfiction book in history. One man had clarity of purpose, helped another man find his. But here's the struggle, if I'm honest. There's this craving deep inside of us. I don't care where you live. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care your background. There is this massive craving in all of us. We're trying to make sense of why we're here. Some days we feel better than others, but we're trying to make sense. When I was preparing this, here's a question I wrote down. Why are we obsessed with figuring out why we're here? Why are we obsessed about that? You say, well, Jason, I don't sit around and ask the question every day. It may not be that question, but it's a form. There's a derivative of that question that we ask. But why? Some thoughts. We're created with eternity in our hearts. In other words, we see the now, but we're designed to believe what's to come. I mean, Ecclesiastes 3:11 talks about you're wired to crave more than just survival. You're wired to crave something more. And that comes when we follow Jesus. We want clarity because we crave control. I won't ask how many of you enjoy control because we might surprise ourselves with how many hands go up. But we don't want to waste time. Look, I don't like wasting time. There's a joke in our household. My kids will remind me and they'll say, Dad, not everything has to be efficient. I don't like to waste time. And they're right. But that's how I think. We try to make sense of time. Here's what's interesting. God rarely gives you a map, but he always gives you himself. And which would you prefer? The map or the one who created the map? So what if God's not inviting you to enjoy just an outcome, but he's inviting you to trust him on this journey? You say, but it's not fun, it's terrifying. True. But he's with you. I think sometimes we make decisions and we choose the wrong things because we're afraid to choose the hard thing. You say, well, what's the hard thing? Surrender. Because if I'm surrendering, that means I'm literally saying, I'm giving this to you, not, have you ever done this with God? I'm going to give this to you. Oh, I'm going to take that thing right on back. You need a little help there, God. The loudest thing, the most visible thing gets our attention. And I think what Jesus is inviting us is, hey, I'm not concerned about what's most visible. I want you to have what's most valuable, and that's me. Because what's visible changes. What's visible is controlled by the moment. But he is most valuable, and he is steady and consistent. So, heading to the finish line. There's an enemy wants to confuse you. There's an enemy that wants to distract you. There's an enemy that wants to accuse you day in and day out. There's an enemy that wants to shame you, to burden you. There's an enemy that wants you to tell yourself a story long enough that you actually start believing it. And if you do, he can paralyze you. And then you're so distracted with whatever the story is that you actually miss just following the rabbi, because confusion comes from the enemy. And when confusion sets up home, insecurity is right behind it. And behind insecurity is when we start questioning ourselves. And remember, I can't figure it out, and I was never asked to. But I was invited to follow him. Clarity comes when we follow Jesus. What's interesting is this. When you go to like a book section and you read books, or you listen to a podcast, or you have conversations with people, or you're making a list of things, I still have to make a decision about the thing. But when I follow Jesus, like, he gives me clarity. You say, well, he just does it in a timely fashion. Well, he does it when the time is right. Have you ever been in the struggle where you felt like, hey, you like, didn't know if you knew that we were approaching the deadline? And he says, I'm not sweating it. I mean, I know you are. But when you sweat, when I sweat, it's our attempt to control. And he says, I'm calling you to something deeper. I'm asking you to surrender. I'm not asking you to figure it out. It's too big, Jason. But what's not too big is just following me, making the decision to surrender, to follow me. You have a deeper need. And here's the beautiful thing about purpose. When you read, when you make lists, when you ask people, and all of those things, I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong. I do those too. But what those things don't give back to us is they don't see us as we are and still say, hey, follow me. When we see those things, we're not known by those things. But when I follow Jesus, I am known by him. And every single one of us are wired to be seen, known, and understood. Things don't do that. He does. And that is one massive reason we pursue all this stuff, because those things don't do that for us. And he says, I can do that. That's my specialty. I can see you. I can understand you. I can know you and still look at you with the deepest affection and say, keep following me. But you don't know the stuff that lingers in the shadows. I actually know more than you remember. Follow me. But I'm not going to get it all right. Yeah, you're human. Follow me. I don't have clarity on like all this stuff I'm supposed to be doing. Imagine being the disciples when they were asked by Jesus, when they were told by Jesus, follow me. I mean, they were raised to be doing what they were doing. Think about the fishermen. That's how they made a living. They were raised since they were young. And Jesus says, hey, follow me. You want me to leave everything I know, I thought was my purpose, to follow you? Yep. Surrender. And what's interesting is following Jesus isn't meant to feel amazing and to feel easy and to feel convenient. And when it begins to feel inconvenient, when it feels difficult, that's when we step back like it shouldn't be this way. But what if we stayed in and we just kept following? God, this feels really hard. I know. I'm still here. Keep following. I don't understand. I know. Keep following. Maybe the question is not why am I here, because that is focused on me. But maybe the question is, where is Jesus working and how do I join him? And that's what I learned from going through experiencing God when I was 16 years old. So one thing that I learned, to ask myself a different question because it gave me a different answer. So I went from focusing on me. You say, Jason, well, do you ever struggle with that? For sure. But I went from why am I here, focused on me, to Jesus, where are you, and how do I join you? Because I'm trying to answer the first question, and it is up to him to answer the second question. So it moves from me to him. It's like me to he, right? And I get a different answer. I put these in my notes. Maybe this is a word to me. He's not hiding, he's near. Before you ask the question, he's already written your story. He's glad to be with you, and he invites you to be glad to be with him. I thought about this when I was by myself and just thinking on this. Did you know that your life was already thought about before your first breath? That's the attention he gave you before you even entered the world. Why wouldn't he still give you the deepest affection now? Psalm 139:16, you've heard this. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. You say, well, Jason, if that's true, then why is my life so stinking hard? Why do I feel confused? Why does it feel so chaotic? It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean that he is with you in the moment. Before your eyes saw the world for the first time, his eyes were already on you with great affection. So, here you go. God sees right where you are this morning. God sees exactly what you have and your perspective, what you don't have. God sees what you're telling yourself. God sees what excuses keep you stuck. God sees the decision you make that only slow you down, or worse, maybe those decisions hurt you. God sees someone in this room, you. He intricately made before your eyes ever saw the world. And he's proud of you this morning. And he says, hey, keep following me. So if you're wanting clarity, maybe this is for you. A little bit of a poetic summary. I keep asking, why am I here? As if there's a code to crack, a mission to unlock, a secret only the elite or enlightened can find. I want to know, I want to control, because if I can define it, maybe I can dominate it. Maybe I can finally matter. So, I chase purpose in places that sparkle but don't satisfy. Success, status, scrolling through everyone else's highlight reel while my own story feels stuck. I try the right books, the wrong crowds, the loudest voices, the clearest formulas, but the answer doesn't show up in applause or platforms or perfectly designed 5-year plans. The ache stays, the question lingers, and maybe, just maybe, I've been asking the wrong question. There was a woman bleeding, broken, 12 years of why me, 12 years of shame and silence and shadows. But one day she stopped asking why and she started reaching for who. She didn't beg for answers, she reached for Jesus. She didn't demand clarity, she touched the very edge of his robe. And in that moment, healing came. Peace came. And purpose? It came following the touch. Maybe the real question isn't why am I here, but where is he? And will I join him? Because he's not hiding, he's not playing games, he's not waiting for you to figure it out before he walks with you in it. So no. Purpose isn't something you find, it's someone you follow. And maybe you we've been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe if we ask a different question, we would actually get the answer our soul craves. So, you don't have to ask any longer, I wonder why I'm here. Because today you can say this. Listen to him. I know why you're here on earth. Follow me. I will show you your best next step. You'll see. Focus on me and don't be overwhelmed with where to be. I will show you where I'm working. I will invite you to join me there. The obsession for purpose gets solved in my peaceful presence. You'll see. You'll see. Will you follow me? Let's pray. Maybe this morning you're in that spot. Everything is amazing. It's super smooth, super clear. And you're like, man, I'm at a good spot. Maybe you're in a spot that it is not clear. Maybe you're discouraged today. Maybe there's even someone in your family that finds themselves in this spot. It may not be you. Maybe someone in your family, a friend, maybe. What I want us to consider is when I think about the woman in Luke chapter 8, had clarity of purpose, has a medical issue, in isolation for 12 years, her purpose changes, and she hears about Jesus, and she doesn't think about me, but she asks, where is he? And she's on a mission to find him. She finds him. If I could just get close to him, everything will change. And for you, how close are you to Jesus this morning? Because if you follow him and stay close to him, the whole purpose thing, it gets clarity. The whole peaceful thing, you get peace. Your best next step, he's got you. You'll see. Father, sometimes we try to take over because we don't feel like you're moving in enough time. But today, could we surrender to you and ask you, Jesus, where are you? And how do I join you where you are and in what you're doing? That you will not hide from us. It is not on us to figure it out. It is on us to surrender to you. And when we do and follow you, it's where everything changes. Oh, and purpose, it takes care of itself. Because we get you, and when we get you, we get all that we need. So help us to follow you. In Jesus' name, amen.